Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perticchese, and thank you for joining me as always. Week 11 already of the college football season in the books. Week 10 of the NFL concluding tonight with Monday Night Football, Broncos versus Bills. So much to talk about. This was without a doubt one of the biggest college football season weeks of the season. So much to talk about, so much from a draft perspective. I came on last week and shared my updated rankings. I feel like there's already things that dramatically changed watching all the games last weekend, and I'll kind of share those thoughts with you as well. Let's jump right into the NFL draft report for this week. Go right to the SS teams of the week, but a lot of players I kind of want to talk about that I think there was a lot to dissect this past weekend. Let's start with first string quarterback of the week. That is Jayden Daniels out of LSU. They beat Florida. He throws for 372 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then rushes for 234 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was one of the best performances I have seen from a quarterback at the college level in quite some time. I said last week that he, of all the quarterbacks I talked about in my top 10 or top 9, he was the one that had the greatest chance to move up. A performance like that, he already last week I said he was now in the round 2 mix. A performance like that, I think, catapults his draft stock to round 1. You can make the case now, and I think it should be Drake Maye and Caleb Williams, some way 1 and 2. I still slightly prefer Shedeur Sanders long-term over Jayden Daniels. But it's hard. When I said last week, you could rearrange 4 through 8, 4 through 9 for me. What I saw out of Jayden Daniels this week was a guy who I think could be a starting NFL caliber quarterback at the next level. A guy who can bring to the NFL very much what Jalen Hurts brings, aspects of what Lamar Jackson could bring. So I think Jayden Daniels has now put himself in the mix to be QB3 in this class because Shedeur Sanders, not coming out. We'll talk a little bit more about that, in a second. That I think Jayden Daniels now, his accuracy to push the ball vertically down the field, his playmaking ability, these are literally 2 of the traits you need to be able to do at the next level. The rest of the stuff you hope comes together. The processing, full field reads. He's shown some of that. He's shown great development in that. But when you take the arm talent, the athleticism, the playmaking ability, the ability to push the ball vertically down the field with good ball placement and accuracy, you have a guy. I don't see a scenario anymore where he's not in the round 1 mix. That was how impressive a performance it was by Jayden Daniels this past week. First string running back of the week, Blake Corum, Michigan, run-oriented second half game plan over Penn State. Blake Corum at the forefront of that, 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. Easily in the mix to be one of the first 3 to 5 backs in this class. I think lock him in for day 2. First string wide receiver of the week, I gave it to Jayden Daniels' teammate, Bryan Thomas. 6 catches, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I talked last week. He was a guy now in the mix, in the top 50 mix, second round mix. Could maybe even see his stock rise even higher. I don't see a scenario where he gets in my top 5, but I think right after that, he's in the mix. 6th, 7th, 8th best wide receiver in this draft class, working on a full deep dive of Bryan Thomas. Another really impressive performance. And the first string tight end of the week, Bryson Nesbitt, again, 7 catches, 68 yards, and a touchdown. Caught a touchdown late in that game, showing it impressive ball skills, body control, and the ability to go up and get it in the end zone. Nesbitt is stacking really good performances week after week now. Very impressed with what we're seeing from Bryson Nesbitt. I think he's squarely in the mix now for day 2. That's how it's been trending over the last couple of weeks. If we take this to the second string team of the week, at the quarterback position, statistically, it wasn't as gaudy as some of the other numbers, but Drake Maye in that game against Duke, things that you want to see at the next level: composure, the ability to make big fourth quarter throws, big fourth down throws, third down throws. He was only 342 yards and a touchdown, but big plays all game, especially late, especially in overtime. I think now the margin, I don't know if there is a margin anymore. I said it last week. When I watched them both play this week, and every time I watch them both play back to back or something like that, Drake Maye is starting to impress me more than Caleb Williams. I didn't see a scenario. For me, it was a clear 1-2 in the summer. Then it was a 1A, 1B. But every week I watch them. And every week I dissect them and look at what I'm looking for. And to me, I think you can make the case now Drake Maye 1A, Caleb Williams 1B. It's going to go down to the wire. I might just call it a tie at some point, but either one of these guys on the trajectory to be a potential franchise quarterback. I think they'll be the top 2 picks in the draft. I'd be stunned if they're not, whether the teams that want the quarterback or teams that trade up. They're just too talented of prospects to not go 1-2, even at the greatness of my next guy I'll get to momentarily, the second string wide receiver of the week, Marvin Harrison. Another ridiculous performance, 7 catches, 149 yards, and 2 touchdowns. As special of a prospect as he is. And listen, I think he's going to be a top 5 to 10 wide receiver by his second season. That's how special of a player he is. I think he's on the trajectory to be one of the best 3 to 5 wide receivers in all of football in very short time. But when you have a franchise quarterbacks like Caleb Williams, like Drake Maye, I think it's going to push Marvin Harrison. I don't see Marvin Harrison probably getting past 3rd again, whether it's to a team that wants him, needs him, who couldn't use a Marvin Harrison, to be honest, or a team that makes an aggressive move up to go get him if another team wants to move back and wants O-line help or D-line help or edge rusher help. Maybe there's a trade scenario there, but Marvin Harrison, special player. I skipped over second string running back of the week. I'm going to give it to Bucky Irvin out of Oregon, 118 yards rushing and a touchdown, 5 catches, 43. Very multi-dimensional, versatile piece. I think he's probably a late round 3 to somewhere around 4 type prospect. But I think Bucky Irvin for today's NFL, where it's committees galore, I think Bucky Irvin could be a better version of what Kyren Williams was doing for the Rams earlier this year. And Kyren was getting a heavy workload, but that's not ideal for him. I think Bucky Irvin could be a guy, 10 to 12 touches a week, could make an impact. I really am a fan of Bucky Irvin and what he can bring at the next level as that third down, change of pace type runner, pass catching back. And then second string tight end of the week could have been first string. Impressive performance from Cade Stover out of Ohio State. 7 catches, 79 yards, and a touchdown. Ohio State has had more production from the tight end position this year than all my years. I feel like covering college football pretty closely. And Cade Stover is continuing week in and week out to be really impressive, not only statistically, but also in terms of he blocks, he can play in line. That's not this, I don't think Brock Bowers is going to be much used in line. Jatavian Sanders not going to be used much in line. Bryson Nesbitt, I don't think he's going to be used much. But Cade Stover could be the best all-around tight end prospect in this class. That'll pencil him for day 2 for sure when it comes to draft season. Some other guys I just want to talk about because there were so many guys that stood out this week. Bo Nix, his performance over USC, 412 yards, 4 touchdowns. I'll continue to say I think Bo Nix is ticketed for round 2. But could a team fall in love with him and push him up into round 1? I don't think it's crazy. Michael Penix Jr., impressive performance, 332 yards, 2 touchdowns, very good versus a very good Utah defense. Michael Penix now has beat Utah and Oregon, has Washington undefeated. I think he's another guy. Round 2, could a team fall in love and push him up into round 1? Maybe, but I think the talent is more round 2. We'll see. Still have some concerns about handling pressure, playing off structure. But, man, when he has the time, the accuracy, the ball placement, understanding reading coverages, progression reading, finding second and third reads, Michael Penix Jr. shows it all. A couple other things. Talked about it before. Deion Sanders came out last week and said both his sons, Shadu and Shiloh, are going to come out together. I think that means 2025 is where that's ticketed. We'll see if that changes, but I think that's the plan right now. I always thought that was the plan. Talked about Tyler Van Dyke sneaking into like my top 11 or top 12 last week. He was benched last week, did not play in that game against Florida State, came in on the final drive for an interception. If he's being benched, again, doesn't speak volumes about, NFL teams thinking you're going to invest, a top 100 pick on a guy who can't even keep his job at college. We'll see if he, thinks about the transfer portal, or what goes on with Tyler Van Dyke. JJ McCarthy game. Talked about it last week. Very polarizing prospect. A lot of people that I respect tremendously think he's a round 1 prospect. I have never seen anything to think round one. I think to be honest with you, I look at him and I think more round two, late round two, round three. But I've been waiting to see where am I missing something? Have I not seen the right games? Am I, without having, access to some of these people have, what am I missing about JJ McCarthy that makes me think I don't see franchise quarterback? I don't even know if I see, Mac Jones or Kenny Pickett. I don't see Daniel Jones, like when I watch him play, like in terms of even just the physical traits at times, in certain aspects of it. I see a good player. So I was really ready to watch him this past week against Ohio State. And then they only let him throw the ball 8 times, 7 of 8. They just didn't need him. And I could come on here and say, well, does that speak volumes about they don't trust them? Yeah, listen, I thought about that a little bit on Saturday when I was watching the game. How much must you really trust your player and not even be willing to throw it all and literally have a game plan that the Giants used against the Jets when Tommy DeVito came in? But it was also, it was working. They needed the victory. They were playing without their head coach. So there was a lot of factors that went into that. I still think J.J. McCarthy, for me, is a day 2 guy. I prefer Jayden Daniels. I prefer Michael Penix Jr. I can make the case for Bo Nix, other guys ahead of him. But I'm going to still wait and see. I think Michigan's going to the college football playoff. I think they're going to beat Ohio State. Let's see how he does against Ohio State. They're not going to be able to sit there and hide him. Let's see how he does in the playoff. Georgia's beatable this year. Can Michigan take him down? Can J.J. McCarthy have big games? I'm leaving the window and the door open because a lot of tremendous people I respect think he's a round 1 guy. I haven't seen it yet. I'm waiting for these games against some of these teams that he has on the schedule left and what I think will be in the playoffs as well to reserve judgment on JJ McCarthy until I see him. Because right now I don't see a round 1 guy. I see him being a guy that teams would look at, maybe push into round 1. And when you push guys into round 1, you get the Patriots with Mac Jones. You get the Giants with Daniel Jones. You get the Steelers with Kenny Pickett. I didn't think any of those guys were round 1 caliber quarterbacks. They all went round 1. I understood why they went round 1 for the most part, because teams are desperate. They fall in love with guys. They don't want to wait to another year. But you watch what Jayden Daniels has done at LSU. You watch what Drake Maye does with an inferior UNC team. You watch Caleb Williams with not a great supporting team around him. And would JJ McCarthy do that if he was there? Because I know if Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, or Jayden Daniels were in Michigan, they'd be stars still. And maybe even better with that run game and that old line. I don't know if in reverse, if JJ McCarthy was asked to do that much more, he'd be able to rise up and carry LSU in these games that are shootouts. He'd be able to keep USC competitive when their defense lets up 40 to 60 points a game. I don't know. He'd be able to, play with a cast of supporting cast that Drake Maye does and elevate them and win games and stay competitive. I don't know. I don't see it with JJ McCarthy yet, but I'll continue to reserve judgment to see if he belongs in that round 1 tier until I see the whole season kind of play itself out. At the running back position, Jonathan Brooks, I talked about him. His stock continues to soar, 104 yards and 2 touchdowns this past week over TCU. Like I said, I think he's squarely in the mix for round 5. A name that I've been talking about for 2 years. Big week this week for Rasheen Ali at a Marshall, 165 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's up to 932 yards and 14 touchdowns, and he's a really good receiver as well. And 2 senior running backs I needed to talk about based on their performances this week. Cody Schrader out of Missouri, 205 yards and a touchdown. He's got 1,124 yards and 11 touchdowns. The 5'9", 214-pound senior. And RJ Harvey at a UCF, 206 yards and 3 touchdowns. And UCF takes down number 15 ranked Oklahoma State. He's got 1,082 yards and 12 touchdowns this year. Another senior, 5'8", 195 pounds. Really impressive performances, amazing seasons from them too right now. I want to get some film on them and take a look and see if those are guys, either one of them that could be in the mix to be draftable at the next level. At the wide receiver position, I want to mention Xavier Leggett. He's a guy who's been consistently producing this year for South Carolina, 9 catches, 120 yards. He's up to 59 catches, 1,093 yards and 5 touchdowns, 6'3", 227 pounds. I've watched a decent amount of Leggett, going to get him in the scouting notebook as well. I think he's a guy who's squarely in the mix for round 3. So he's a really intriguing prospect that could sneak into day 2. Continue to be impressed with Des Walker out of UNC. Drake May's number 1 guy, 7 catches, 162 yards there. Before we take this over to a real short Devy Slant, I will want to comment that the All-Star game is now being open for juniors. I really think is a game-changing type thing. I do feel a little bit bad for some of the seniors that might get squeezed out of this. But what I hope it does is I hope it elevates, the Shrine Bowl to be even bigger. I hope it elevates the NFLPA Bowl to be even bigger, because what's going to end up happening is if a lot of these underclassmen end up getting to the Senior Bowl, it's going to push some guys out of the Senior Bowl that would normally be there. And then I think you're going to see the Shrine Bowl have better players and more draftable players, and the NFLPA Bowl have more draftable players. And that's a good thing. More attention. What I would say is there's like overlap between the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl that never used to be there. I think they got to get rid of that. They need to kind of stand alone. And I think you need to almost have these as 3 separate weeks now. Once the season is kind of winding down, I almost think you got to have 3 separate weeks of these, the NFLPA Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, because there's going to be a lot of really good prospects that are ending up at each of these different, college all-star games. And I know there's some other ones I'm forgetting as well. But I think it's a good thing. I think NFL teams getting more access to these underclassmen prior to the combine and stuff like that. I think that these all-star games really give better access to players. It's a reason why we see so many teams draft players that they coach at the Senior Bowl, or, guys they really got to meet at the Senior Bowl and then again at the combine, and multiple times they just get to know the player better, the person better, and not just the player. So I think it's a really good thing. I think it makes the all-star circuit so much more fun now. We'll see how many of these underclassmen, a lot of these underclassmen juniors are really near the top of the draft. So sometimes they might just choose not to do anything. So that'll be something, a little bit of a buzzkill, but I think it just opens up that you'll get enough guys, even if it's a lot of day 2 guys and late round 1 guys who maybe think they could elevate their stock, get to one of these all-star games, impress. Unless you're a top 5 or top 10 lock pick, then maybe you don't go and perform or whatever, but go to one of these all-star games. So it's going to be fun that there's now going to be even more highly regarded, high-rated prospects at these all-star games for sure. Next up, if we take this to the Devy Slant, only guys I really want to talk about this week. Drew Allar was supposed to be the next big underclassman quarterback. I have watched him play multiple times this year. There is nothing in his game right now that reminds me anything of Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, or the previous, top level quarterback prospects that we had. He's an intriguing prospect. He's got traits for sure, but I think the underclassmen quarterbacks who are non-draft eligible, I should say, are really the weakest batch right now that we've seen in quite some time. Like, we knew Caleb Williams was coming. We knew Drake Maye was coming. We knew Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields in that draft class were coming. Who's the next wave that we feel really strong about of saying they're the guys who are guaranteed to be in the mix next year, top 5, top 10? I don't see it for Drew Allar. I don't see it with Klubnik from Clemson. I don't see it, with, I think, Weigman from Texas A&M. These were the guys that were supposed to be the guys. So, yeah, Shadu Sanders coming back to school, I think makes the 2025 class at least have him. And I think he's the betting favorite right now to be the number 1 quarterback in the 2025 NFL draft. And I'm not sure anybody else right now, I feel even close to saying top 5, top 10. I will say all year I've continued to be impressed with Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. This past week, 234 yards and 3 touchdowns. Every week you just see him making new plays, handling pressure better, buying time in the pocket, moving around the pocket, manipulating the pocket, running when he needs to. I think Jalen Milroe is going to be a star for Alabama. He'd be the guy I'd be very intrigued with in a Devy setting to get him on my team now. So that would be a guy right now that I'd be very intrigued with from that. Let's take this over to the NFL side. Recap this past week. Week 10 in the books, except for Monday Night Football. Let's do a little bit NFL rookie report. Let's start with CJ Stroud again at the quarterback position. I don't know what more there is to say. The reason why teams take shots at the quarterback position, the reason why, even if you have a good starting quarterback, you should constantly be looking at the next quarterback prospects coming up down the pike and in the draft. Because it's a league where, for the most part, if you don't have the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the Jalen Hurts, the Joe Burrows, and maybe on the, on the next step or the next tier, Justin Herbert with all the physical traits, maybe I'm missing somebody. If you don't have that level of quarterback play, you need everything else to be perfect. You need everything to be pristine. You need great coaching. Now, listen, we'll see if Brock Purdy can do it. And I'll talk about Brock Purdy in a little bit again. But Brock Purdy's in that unique scenario. Everything was perfectly set up for Matthew Stafford, who's a very good quarterback, but I don't think he's a guy who elevates. We saw it in Detroit. He could never elevate Detroit to be a great team. But he had a perfect scenario there with the Rams. Great offense, great coaching, elite pass rusher and Aaron Donald. They had other good defensive players that year too. Perfect storm. But who else? If you don't have one of those guys, it's hard to be a consistent winner at the next level. So that's why teams take shots. But you got to think they have a high ceiling. That's the key. CJ Stroud is showing the difference that a high-level prospect can make on a franchise. Guys that I respect tremendously who do the Big Blue Panther Giants podcast, they were talking about, you look at the Texans roster and the Giants roster, even with a lot of the injuries the Giants have had this year. Is the Texans roster really that much better than the Giants roster? Houston has been decimated with O-line injuries. Giants have been decimated with O-line injuries. Nico Collins is a good young receiver. Tank Dell's a rookie. Been explosive. Giants have better defensive players than the Texans do. But the difference, CJ Stroud is playing out of his mind as a rookie. Everything we saw in that Georgia game, when he faced Georgia and he showed the ability to handle pressure, the ability to play off structure, make throws on the run, we're seeing it from CJ Stroud every single week. This week, taking his team, going on the road into Cincinnati, another game-winning drive, bringing his team back. We just continue to see it. He's been the complete package. If you're a Carolina Panther fan, you got to be sick to your stomach watching what CJ Stroud has done for the Texans, what Anthony Richardson was doing for the Colts pre-injury. I'm not ready to give up on Bryce Young. He was my number one quarterback. I liked them. But you're seeing issues with Bryce Young pop up. We'll see if they're correctable. We'll see if when he's got a better team around him. But I'm not sure we ever thought CJ Stroud was going to be as good as he is right now. So it's hard for me to think Bryce Young is ever even going to reach to what CJ Stroud is right now, because CJ Stroud is playing at a really high level right now as a rookie with a pretty weak supporting cast. It's been remarkable what CJ Stroud has done, and the Texans deserve all the credit in the world. I crucified them when they moved back up to get Will Anderson, because I was worried they were going to be giving away a top 3 pick the following year. But now, when you answer the quarterback position, you can do things like that. And then they got their top level pass rusher as well. So they got both. And we already see how dramatically it's changing the culture and everything about the Texans. The running back position, the top 2 guys, we talk about them every week, Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs, even with David Montgomery back in the mix, 14 carries, 77 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 3 catches, 35 yards. There's enough to go around there. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to settle in to be a 14 to 16 touch player. That's where I think this is going. Some weeks it'll be a little more, some weeks it'll be a little less. But in those 14 to 16 touches, you're going to see impact on an Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara type level. I always comped them to Eckler because I thought the body type was way more Austin Eckler than I thought it was Alvin Kamara. I think the Kamara was more usage-based. But either way, that's what Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be. It's going to be fun to watch him play in that Lions offense. Bijan finally got a little bit heavier of a workload, 106 total yards and a touchdown. Hopefully they continue to feed Bijan the ball. Hopefully there's a coaching regime there change so we can maybe get more usage from their elite playmakers that they invested top 10 picks on for sure. Talked about Tank Dell slightly before. 6 catches, 56 yards, and a touchdown. Did have to leave the game for injury, came back in. I mean, what is there to say about Tank Dell? I mean, if you're re-ranking the wide receivers from this draft class, it's a lot. It's intrigue at the top. You got Puka Nacua. You got, Jordan Addison. You got Zay Flowers. You got Tank Dell. You got Jackson Smith and the Jigba. I understand where he was before the draft, but are we still so sure that Tank Dell's not going to be a better player than Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, even Jackson Smith and the Jigba? Right now in fantasy, it's not even a no-brainer. You should want Tank Dell over Quentin Johnson, and it's not even close in my eyes. Okay, I had my reservations about Quentin Johnson coming into the league. Those reservations are exponentially of increase with his inability to be a weapon and a continuous factor for a team that is desperately in need of another playmaker. He could still turn around and be a productive player. I think Tank Dell could be a really game-breaking type player that has really good route running ability to win vertically, his size, and he can play outside. It's tremendous. Michael Mayer had a really nice touchdown catch last night, showing great ball skills inside the end zone. I think we'll start to see Michael Mayer by next year develop into more of a consistent fantasy asset and really, continue to make this tight end draft class from last year a really special class with Laporta, with Kincaid, with Mayer. And I also think Luke Musgrave, once things get settled there in Green Bay, also very high upside and ceiling as well. If we take this to close out the night with the Dynasty report, similar to last week, I'm going to hit on some buys and sells. Okay, so I have 3 buys for the week and 3 sells for the week. The buys. Let's start with the buys first. At the quarterback position, I mentioned before, Brock Purdy. I talked about last week or the week before, just how weak Dynasty quarterbacks are right now. The question marks are really long when you consider, we have Mahomes, we have Allen, we have Hurts, we have Lamar, we have Burrow, we have Herbert, we have Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud. And then if you want to say, okay, still, are we sure Trevor Lawrence is going to be great? Because I'm starting to have a lot of concerns about that. Tua, we know he plays great against inferior opponents. It seems like Miami struggles when they face better defenses. We know he's got the concussion concerns. But and then there's Kyler Murray, who just came back this past week, and I told you to buy him last week. But after that, it's question marks. I think Brock Purdy's locked in for a while to be the 49ers starter. They're not going to try to do the big trade up again. That backfired in them. They're too good of a team. So I think Brock Purdy's going to be a guy who could be a reliable low quarterback 1 to mid quarterback 2, but he still is a guy that people just are on when it comes to fantasy. So if you're in a 2 quarterback league or you're in a 1 quarterback league, but maybe you don't have just a solid starter, I think you could try to get Brock Purdy. Would be an interesting guy. And if you're in a 2 quarterback league, I really would be aggressive in going to get him. I think he's a rock solid guy that you could have as your second quarterback as you strive to try to find, or if you have one of those elite guys at the top, the dual guys, or guys who put up the staggering passing numbers. Next buy, 2 tight ends. Won't cost a lot, but Trey McBride and Jake Ferguson are 2 guys that I think are on the trajectory. I think Trey McBride has got top 8-ish upside when you talk about the tight end position. When you look at the top 8 or so guys, you still have Kelsey, Andrews, Hawkinson, still put Pitts there. You got Laporta, you got Goddard, you got Kincaid, you got Kittle. So I think you can make the case right now, Trey McBride is in the mix to be as high as 9 on that list. We want Pat Freiermuth over him, Evan Ingram over him. Luke Musgrave and Michael Mayer have to show that they belong up there, David Njoku. So I think you can make the case that Trey McBride is somewhere on the trajectory of maybe being a top 8 to top 12 tight end right now in Dynasty. And let's see if he can continue to work his way into the mix. I mean, he was a 2nd-round pick last year. He was the number 1 tight end in that class. He has played phenomenal when been given opportunities. And now with them, with Zach Ertz getting injured, we've seen those opportunities and he has really shined for sure. And then Jake Ferguson, listen, Dallas continues to get production out of the tight ends. We see it every single week. I think he's going to be the guy I know they drafted Luke Schoonmaker, and I think that's what'll keep Jake Ferguson's value down and why he will be easier to buy than Trey McBride. because I just look at Jake Ferguson and I think he's going to be a guy just like Dalton Schultz was there. Guy who's going to produce low tight end 1 numbers to high tight end 2 numbers. And he doesn't cost a lot. And I don't think his dynasty value would be hard to get because people are still thinking Luke Schoonmaker's going to take that job. I'm not sure he is. Most of their collegiate careers, Jake Ferguson was more highly regarded in terms of his pass catching ability than Luke Schoonmaker. Teams want 2 tight ends. Listen, the Jaguars drafted Brenton Strange late round 2 after they gave Evan Ingram big money. So it happens. So buy those 2 tight ends. And as for my sells, I think I could see Houston, but hitting the quarterback position, still having a lot of cap dollars. I could see them either being aggressive for a free agent running back, maybe Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, somebody like that. Okay. Or I could see them invest a day 2 pick in a running back to either complement or supersede Dameon Pierce. We saw Devin Singletary have a great week this week. Dameon Pierce has been losing work here or there this year. The running back position in Dynasty, in fantasy in general, is weak. If people are valuing Dameon Pierce as like RB16 to RB20 in Dynasty, I think I'd get out now. See what I can get for him. And then on the other side, 3 more sells, all young wide receivers who once upon a time were super highly regarded. If anybody is still valuing Skyy Moore, Kadarius Toney, or Elijah Moore in any way, shape, or form as intriguing, I'd sell them all. And it pains me to say on Kadarius Toney, pains me to say on Elijah Moore, I was never a Skyy Moore guy. But if you could get a late round 2 rookie pick, I might even take an early round 3 rookie pick for some of these guys. Elijah Moore has now fallen behind Cedric Tillman on the depth chart. The Jets gave him away. The Browns talked him up that they wanted to make an integral part. It didn't happen. The Chiefs wanted Kadarius Toney to be a big weapon. The Giants, who desperately need playmakers, shipped them out. And at the time, I thought it was a terrible decision because of the upside and talent. But if Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs can't get Kadarius Toney, the mental side of it, of learning the playbook and being reliable, then who's going to do it? He's going to show bits and pieces here and there, but he can't even play 30% of his snaps for a team that is in dire need of wide receiver production. And then Skyy Moore, the Chiefs wanted him to be a thing. The Devy and the draft Twitter community want him to be a thing. The fantasy community want him to be a thing. He hasn't been able to seize the role now for 2 years. If you can get a late second round rookie pick for any of these guys, take it. If you can get an early to mid round 3 rookie pick, I think I'd still take it and then use that as other ammo to maybe move up in the second round or whatever, or trade for an older veteran or whatever that will be better than what production you're getting from these guys. So there it is, guys. Fantasy Dynasty Report, NFL Rookie Report, quick Devy Slant, and an in-depth NFL Draft Report for this week. If you're enjoying the content, please get over to the website, rate, review, please get over to wherever you listen to your podcast, rate, review, and subscribe. Get over to the website, easiest way, ssfootball.com. Check out our premium content tab. And for $9.99, you get access to all of our premium notebooks, all of our premium content. It is the best way to support the show and help us continue to do what we do here at Saturday to Sunday. So, on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nicano, and myself, thank you for joining us. And we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.